This song was not recorded or written by the Hangmen. And no, that's not clickbait. Welcome to Glass Gecko. Today I'm going to be looking through the history and the music of a mysterious band who had a mini Beatlemania incident and even played a live show for the Kennedys. I'm going to try and answer the question, who were the Hangmen? Ladies and gentlemen, about 2 years ago YouTube recommended me this song. Now it's no big surprise that I'm quite a big fan of 60s music. So when YouTube recommended me this song all those years ago, I was glad to have another song to add to the catalogue. However, I looked into the band, I couldn't find much, and then I moved on with my life because I wasn't making YouTube video essays 2 years ago. However, about a month ago, YouTube recommended this song again, and I really, this time, wanted to get to the bottom of who exactly the Hangmen were. Many people also had this song recommended to them randomly, and many people also loved it. The video in question has a description linking the wiki page and credits a man named Joe Triplett for the writing. Also a few comments gave a little backstory to the band, but hang on, I've tried my best to research this topic, and in this video I'm going to go into some detail as to why what some of these comments are saying is true, but why a lot of it is actually false. And I'll tell you, things get a little bit confusing when it comes to the history. I'm going to be going through the history of the band now, and I'll be talking about the music at this time here. Now, I am going to give a quick disclaimer. When you look at these old school underground bands, especially historical bands, it's quite hard to find concrete sources on the history of them. A lot of the stuff that I've been able to find is sort of hearsay, quotes from the band members themselves and interviews. And of course we can see that with a lot of artists, sometimes the artists themselves forget about songs that they've already written, so just keep that in mind. Before I move on as well, and I don't want to make a big song and dance over it, but with our last video I was able to reach over 300 subscribers, and it certainly means a lot to me. I'm still trying to figure out this whole YouTube thing, and I'm still working on editing and getting a bit better with writing the scripts, all that sort of thing. But you know, to all the people who have supported me so far, I really do appreciate it. But enough of that, let's get into the history. The story starts in 1963 with a Washington DC band named the Reekers. This was started by a chap named Tom Guernsey and his brother John. The lineup changes constantly except for 3 key members. Tom Guernsey on guitar, Joe Triplett, the man mentioned earlier, on vocals, and Mike Henley on piano. Now I'm going to say this now, the lineups may get a little bit confusing, so I'm going to try and give you a rundown when it's necessary. The only temporary Reekers member in our story who's significant is the drummer Bob Burbridge. He comes in a little bit later. Now, one article I read said that Bob joined the Reekers before the Hangmen, yet this article written by Hangmen guitarist George Daly says it was him who introduced Bob to Tom. I mean, we're about 2 minutes in and we've already found one example of conflicting sources. In 1964 they would get some session time after playing for a rich friend of theirs. Apparently these sessions didn't go too well. They later recorded at Edgewood on K Street, DC, and recorded 2 songs on one track, as this was cheaper than 2. They recorded Don't Call Me Flyface and Grindin', 2 instrumental tracks. After this they sought out Lillian Clybourne to get some sort of record deal. She complied, signing them, and also distributed the records across other record labels in Washington. She sent them to Rufus Mitchell, owner of Rujack Records. The 45 sold out and they had to run a second press. The Reekers never saw a dime of this money, but it did give them exposure. In April of 1965 they started work on their brand new song, The Girl Who Faded Away. It's a bloody good song. However, when they took the song to WWDC, they were actually turned away promotion for the song. The programme director said they should stick to instrumental tracks, much to Triplet's dismay. Yes, it was the Reekers who wrote the song The Girl Who Faded Away. But hang on, why is it credited to the Hangmen then? Don't worry, we'll get into that a little bit later. Tom persisted and wrote another single, this time the song What a Girl Can't Do. This would eventually catapult them to fame. They went to Georgetown to record the song. The studio was much nicer than what they experienced previously, however, the crew was apparently inexperienced. This would actually benefit the band because messing up the drum track gave it an iconic echo. Just as the band were getting noticed, they dispersed. Triplet and Henley left to go to college, and Tom and Bob joined a band called The Hangmen. But hang on, why did the Reekers disperse despite gaining a little bit of success now? And who were the Hangmen? Well, in terms of early Hangmen history, there isn't really much I can tell you, unfortunately. Almost every source I can cite had the band having started in '64 by Mike West and George Daly. This was at Montgomery Junior College, the same college that Tom and Bob attended. They were a band formed in Maryland in 1964. They were heavily inspired by the sound of the British invasion, and they really wanted to get their hands on a British singer. Now, by the time former Reekers Bob and Tom had joined, the band already had a manager. But you may notice that the band started in 1964, but it wasn't until 1965 that Bob and Tom would join the band. I could not find any information on the Hangmen between their 1964 formation and when the Reekers joined, nor could I find any information on what the lineup was before and why they had a manager, despite only having 2 known members, is something that I simply could not find. This source actually says the band was formed by Tom in 1965. Again, I'm not sure where they've got this information from. There's no sources cited, and it seems to coincide with other accounts. As I was saying, they were on the hunt for a British singer. So who better to call than the British Embassy? I didn't know that underground bands could do something so official, but it worked. They were later referred to a singer by the name of Dave Otley. Dave Otley was born in Glasgow and was in the US at the time. So just a rundown. The Reekers had not actually disbanded by this point. They were just on hold while some of the members were away in college. When Tom joined the Hangmen in 1965, Hangman manager Corey Sealfin showed the record What a Girl Can't Do to Fred Foster. Fred Foster was the founder of Monument Records. Now, Tom was a member of both bands at the time, as well as Bob, who went to the same college. Monument needed a band to credit the record to, so Tom had to make the decision to stick with the Reekers or join the Hangmen so the deal could be completed as soon as possible. He ended up joining the Hangmen. Story goes that Triplet was hitchhiking in DC and he was picked up by a car. What a Girl Can't Do was on the radio and he exclaimed how he was the singer of the song. The people in the car didn't believe him. Ouch. Okay, so let's recap. The Reekers are now disbanded. Henley and Triplet are out of the equation for now, and the Hangmen now consist of 5 members. Former Reekers Tom and Bob, who was the drummer, Mike West, the bassist, George Daly on guitar, and now Dave Otley on vocals. Again, things will change, so just be aware. After What a Girl Can't Do was released, Tom was released from his contract from Lillian and put onto a contract with Foster. This is why What a Girl Can't Do and The Girl Who Faded Away are actually credited under the Hangman name. Now, interestingly enough, the instrumental that you hear for The Girl Who Faded Away was recorded by the Reekers. However, the vocals are apparently recorded by Dave Otley. Again, this article says sources say, but these are not sources that I can find. That means that in the description of this video, it might not actually be Triplet who is singing this song, it could be Dave Otley. But again, unless I can find concrete evidence for that, I can't say for sure. I also cannot find the actual Reekers version of the song if that is the case. Arnold Stahl and Mike Clavins of WTTG formed 427 Enterprises. This was solely for the band's promotion. In 1965 they had gigs in high places, embassies, fancy parties, even catching the eye of Newsweek. They even played for the Kennedys. Ethel Kennedy referred the band to play for her husband Robert F. Kennedy at a charity event at their house. Story goes they helped themselves to a bottle of scotch and got hammered, much to the dismay of their managers. Out of all the conflicting sources that I've read about this band, them getting hammered in the Kennedys' kitchen, yeah, I think that's something that I definitely believe. What a Girl Can't Do started gaining rapid momentum in the Washington area. It even dethroned the Beatles at number 1 spot, pushing singles We Can Work It Out and Day Tripper into number 2. Later, they had a bit of a Beatlemania moment themselves. In February of 1966, at a record store in Virginia, owned by Jack Shaver, things got out of hand. The record had already sold 2,500 copies, and now the Hangmen were to play live. Around 4 PM at the store, an estimated 1,500 or more people were inside and out of the record store. They played for 15 minutes before having to be escorted by policemen in a getaway fashion. Bins and display cases were shattered. 3 people fainted, and damages amounted to $500. That's equivalent to about $5,000 in today's money, and no, Jack did not have insurance. Despite all of this, success remained regional. For reasons I can't find, the record label did not push the song outside of Washington. I'm not sure if this was an advertising issue or a contractual issue, we simply don't know. Tom quit college after being offered to play a show on Jerry Blavat's TV. This coincided with his exams. They played What a Girl Can't Do and a cover of Money. After this exposure, they played up and down the East Coast with some famous acts which you can see on the screen now. As far as I can tell, this was around early to mid 1966. For reasons I can't find, Mike at this point left the band. He's replaced by a fellow named Paul Dowell. This was before they recorded their new single Faces in May of 1966. Otley left the group soon after, replaced by Tony Taylor. Again, I don't know why Otley left. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this single, but I'll link an article down below. It's written by George Daly, the guitarist of the band, and how he wrote this song after a live show. The song is emblematic of the fact that the band ended up realising that they were a symbol of how their fans expressed their own emotions. He could see this in the faces of the audience members when he was performing live in the crowd, which I just thought was a pretty cool meaning behind the song. Now to look at the only album released by the Hangmen. It was the Bittersweet LP released in November of 1966. Not much to say in terms of the history, and in terms of the music, I'll get to that later. Guernsey said the producer Buzz was methodical, having the band rehearse before doing the recording proper. They recorded over 2 weeks on a 3-track tape, 11 songs, some covers, some originals. It didn't chart, and I can't really give you any backstory for the album or what any of the other members had to say. Apparently they didn't take it seriously, getting hammered in Nashville during the rehearsal. In 1967, according to the Star Ledger, the band had changed their name to the Buttons, chasing a more psychedelic sort of sound. Their recorded music was unreleased, so I can't listen to it or give it an opinion. Lineups changed again until finally Tom left in 67. The band then renamed to Graffiti. All of the people mentioned in this video so far will crop up again when it comes to the music. But from a band that had their songs released under a different name to a party with the Kennedys, it certainly has been an interesting history to uncover. But now let's take a look at the music. I'll begin with the Reekers. In 1964 they released their first singles, the 2 instrumental tracks with raw surf rock sounds, Don't Call Me Flyface and Grindin'. This isn't music I'm particularly used to or fond of, but it sounds like a strong riff composition from an up-and-coming underground band. And now we get to the big guns. The A-side, What a Girl Can't Do, and the B-side, The Girl Who Faded Away. Let's just say I like them. What a Girl Can't Do is a great rocker. My God, could Triplet scream. It's lively, it's energetic, it's a good blend of old school rock and roll with emerging heavier sounds. A lot of different iterations of the band have done covers of it, so I'd recommend you listen to a few of them to find your favourite. However, for me, the original Reekers version is definitely the best. Then of course we have The Girl Who Faded Away, my favourite song of theirs. I think it's great. It's a very longing sort of sound, an alluring melody, and the tone of the guitar and the singing is beautifully short and sweet. Why the hell the sound engineer did not push it, I have no idea. And to put into perspective that this was written in 1964 by a surf rock band, I think it's arguably quite ahead of its time. The only other musical outlet I could find for the band was the compilation released in 2007 called Meet the Reekers, a play on the American release of With the Beatles, Meet the Beatles. Important to note that a lot of these songs on the album are actually covered. All of the songs were written by the Reekers, but the songs themselves, or some of them, were recorded by other bands later in time. This is very apparent if you listen to it. Some songs have a very more clean studio finish with modern backup vocals, whereas some songs really do sound like 60s demo tapes. I'm not going to bore you with every song, but there's a nice mix. Songs like I Can't Believe and Stone Down Day are great rockers. If I was a teen in 1965 Washington, this would be me. That would be me right now. Being a 60s soft song sap, my favourite song on the album is probably a song they did called Mr. Yates. It's a bit of a sad, slow piano song with a strong bass line. It's just a shame that the audio quality for it is pretty horrible. For obvious reasons, I think listening to it is pretty clearly some form of early 60s demo tape. Another one of my favourite songs on there is the song Nighttime of My Life. This was recorded in the mid-70s by former Reekers members. It's quite an emotional piano song, and it's sung with quite a lot of soul, and it has a great progression. I really like this one. When I look at the album as a whole, I'm surprised I like it as much as I do. I was expecting it to be a bit more dated, but it actually holds up really quite well. Not just because some of the songs were covered later on. I think just listening to the songs you can tell from the very beginning they were pretty good songs. I just wish I had more specific information on the songs themselves. Now onto the Hangmen themselves. The only singles I could find were the before mentioned Faces and its B-side Bad Goodbye. Faces is a bit of a hard rocker, almost a proto-punk style. Almost reminds me of an early Ramones. I'll be honest, I'm not too big a fan of this one. I just don't find it too musically interesting. Nothing very unique. Just a repeating riff. That's not to say it's objectively bad, of course. It's just not for me. It was redone and put on their album Bittersweet, however. This version I quite liked. As I mentioned before, I really do appreciate the meaning behind the song. But in terms of that first version, I'm just not too big of a fan. Bad Goodbye is a slow one. Dave's voice is very unique and adds a very rough and travelled sound. I much prefer the progression and musical ideas put in, as well as the lyrics being more profound. Also, I appreciate some good harmonica solos, which both the Reekers and this song have. Bittersweet LP is next. This is a mix of covers and originals, but I must say it's a very enjoyable 60s album. It has a very nice balance of psychedelic sound and rock, as well as a bit of country. I particularly liked their energetic sitar-laden cover of Dream Baby and Crazy Man. As I say, the version of Faces on the album is superior in my opinion. Maybe that's just me. On the flip side, they also redid What a Girl Can't Do, and I find this one to be much inferior. The appeal of this song comes from its hard rock and roll style. This album, in contrast, is really quite mellow, so they tried to tune the song to it. I'm just not too big of a fan of that. They did, however, have a screamer with their last song, their cover of Gloria. As I say, I think this is a rather good album. I think if you're an avid 60s listener, I would definitely recommend you at least give it a try. One of the technical downsides is just the recording quality, obviously. It's not quite as high as other big budget 60s bands. I think if it had that, it would be an even more solid album, but understandably, the budget demand was a bit lower, so the sound quality reflects that. Hopefully, I at least partially answered the question, who were the Hangmen? It certainly is an interesting story, and one that should not be lost in time. A lot of what I could find was hearsay, word of mouth interviews, a lot of their music being played by different people, a garage surf rock band making it big, dethroning the Beatles and playing to the Kennedys, to a band that was almost forgotten. The music is very solid from both bands, and again, I'd recommend Bittersweet to anyone interested in that kind of music. Tom Guernsey passed away in October of 2012. Dave Otley followed soon later, in November of that year. When I was looking around at stuff to do with the Hangmen and the Reekers, on a lot of YouTube videos, I actually found comments of people who claimed to be friends, family members, people who knew these band members personally. I tried to reply to them, message them to maybe see if they had any information on the band and the people that they were related to. I didn't get anything back, but it's pretty incredible to see a band so underground, yet you can still see traces on a digital footprint of people who knew them telling their stories online in comment sections. It's a pretty cool thing to see, in my opinion. I'm glad YouTube randomly recommended me The Girl Who Faded Away, so that I could delve into this band and uncover some very interesting history, and I hope this video has been informative for you. I want to thank the Hangmen and the Reekers, all the people that made up this historic story, and I want to thank you for watching this video about the band who faded away.